Right. So you see our names and titles up on the screen, but Lindsay, just spend a few minutes to introduce yourself to the crew.
Sure. Hi. Nice to meet you guys. I'm Lindsay Horrigan. I'm the Consumer Growth Officer at Hearst. If you're familiar with Hearst, we have a portfolio of over 20 brands, Cosmopolitan, Good Housekeeping, and then also some digitally native brands like Delish.com, and then brands in the auto space as well, Car and Driver, Motor Trend, Road and Track. And in my role, I feel somewhat like, just because some of the content today and when I was talking to Rob, I've never really been on the ad ops side of the business, so some of it's new for me to just learn, or I've been close to it, but just to kind of hear. But in my role, I'm responsible for subscriptions, affiliate commerce, our licensing business, and then a marketing organization that sort of supports those revenue streams across the portfolio of brands.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And also an
AAM board member.
An AAM board member.
Proud to represent and to be here with you guys.
Perfect, thank you. I'm Richard Murphy. I'm the CEO of AAM, Alliance for Audited Media, the old ABC, the old BPA coming together. We're about a 100-year-old trade organization that ingests publisher data, checks it, and then pushes it out into the agency community. You probably know us from print, but we do have a robust digital arm, a robust ad tech arm, and we're morphing as media is changing as well. So great to be here. Thanks, Rob, for having us here. So Lindsay, let's get into it. All right.
Yes.
So I know a lot of audience people, and they generally come up through the ranks of publishing. Right? They start in publishing and they work themselves up, through the organization. But you took a different path. So you came in on the brand side at Amex, right? Then you moved to the publishing side at Bloomberg. Then you went back to the brand side, Wayfair. Now you're back to publishing at Hearst. So how has that path influenced how you approach Hearst?
So I say this a lot at work, I think with my team or some of my colleagues, but I think like most of my formative beginnings of my career, like I was a brand marketer, I was a performance marketer working on the brand side. So I was saying to someone at lunch today, like I feel a little bit more like I'm a media buyer than anything else, because my time at Amex, or I was in the insurance industry, at the core have been a marketer. And so when I got into publishing, I didn't even know when I took the job that it was what publishing was. I was like, sure, that sounds great, Bloomberg. And I came from Amex. I came at it as a marketer. And so, and ended up actually loving it because I just thought, oh, wow, this is so dynamic. I think all the challenges that publishers are facing can feel heavy or existential, but at the same time, you're on the front line of humanity and where things are going and technology, and you just have to be so much more scrappy and creative, I think, in how you solve problems and what you're doing, versus when I worked at any one of the brands I worked at. Also interesting in a different way, but it's a little more point to point in terms of what you're working on and how you make money. That being said, the how you make money part to me in publishing always felt like there was a confusing squiggle between the lines, between kind of, where you're making money and what we make as a publisher. And so I think that's kind of one of the things I've always brought to it is I'm constantly thinking about how do we not just capture demand, but create it? How do we sell our wares? So I'm kind of bringing that marketer, I think, mindset to everything that we're doing. How do we find the people that might be interested in our product? And so some of that stuff seems obvious, but I do think just given some of the trends that, Katie was talking about on stage from Wired and the history of the industry, some of those more obvious points I think are lost. And if you've ever worked not in publishing, you just have, I think, a stronger sense of that reality than if you've spent your whole career in publishing and you haven't really seen what it's like to sell widgets at Amex or Wayfair, which were, I think, really formative experiences and what I bring to what I'm doing today at Hearst.
Right. So I've actually heard that now a couple of times. So we had the opportunity to have Jacob Donnelly from Media Operators speak at the AAM board meeting. And one of his comments was, publishers have to start thinking as brands. right? And then we heard Katie talk about it as well, that publishers now have to start thinking as brands. Like, that's easy to say, but what does it mean?
Yeah.
What does it mean to
Totally.
think like a brand?
When he came to speak to us, I, of course, was like, "You're speaking my language."
Right.
So I think it's like most fundamental. It's like, what do we stand for? What do we do? Like, what is our core offering? What's our business? How do we talk about it? I mean, the title of the session is telling a better audience story, but like, who are you telling your audience story to, right? Advertisers, consumers. Like, there actually, yes, can be nuances to like what that story is, but the fundamentals need to be actually identical, or actually if there's something wrong, because what you're waking up everyone at your brand or your team is doing has to sort of connect to what do we stand for, what do we believe in, what do we make here, who's it for? And you'd do that if you were, selling, when I was selling furniture at Wayfair, it was like, what are the fundamentals of why you need to buy from us at Wayfair? Why are you here? What makes us better than someone else? And what can we give you, tools, features, benefits that someone else can't? And so I think that's like the marketing 101, the like fundamentals that when you think about when you say publishers need to start acting like brands, like those are sort of the beginnings of that piece. I think the other piece that's much more specific to the moment that we're in now is this idea that before audience was free flowing, and it was like, to Katie's point, you didn't really have to work too hard. You just put something out there and people showed up, or publishers basically helped build the internet. And so you put it up on Google or wherever else, and then traffic came to your site. If you're selling furniture at Wayfair, if you're marketing credit cards at Amex, like, you have to go out and find those people. You kind of hope that you showed up on Google or somewhere else, but you have to go search for them, and you might have to pay to find them. And you need to be smart about it, right? It isn't just like blanketly doing that. You have to do it in a way that makes economic sense, just like a brand would be doing. You have to invest in all the things that'll, let's say you did market and you spent money on doing that. You have to invest in all the things that'll make sure by the time you showed up in that moment, you like have your shot and you shoot your best shot. You have the best message about it. You packaged it the right way. You found the people that you think you have the most intent for what you're doing. Like, those are all, I think, marketing fundamentals that you would do if you were at a brand that a lot of publishers are just now, thinking, oh, wow, like seemingly obvious, but I think I have to invest more here, be more thoughtful about it. There's something I've been thinking about a lot, and I think Katie's talk sort of reminded me of it, which is basically like, that's not new if you're a B2B publisher, like, right? And yeah. I think that's where like, again, is like obvious, but you lose sight, is that in consumer media, it was just so scaled that you kind of were like, well, we're for everyone. Like, you didn't have to actually task yourself with deciding who you were for and who you were for not. And I think as the landscape has shifted, consumer media publishers actually just need to take some of the fundamentals from a B2B media space where, those are brands or spaces that you couldn't be everything to everyone. So you had to be really thoughtful about like, who is my ideal customer profile, and where am I going to find them, and how do I make content that's really specific for them that they're going to find interesting. And I think the spaces in consumer media where you're still operating at scale, really tough actually to kind of define some of those things.
Yeah, I agree, and that's a great point about B2B media, because they do a lot of things well, and I'm starting to see that translate into consumer media and news media as well. But let's pivot this now to audiences, right? So at AAM, we have over 1,000 publisher members or we're an association, so we have 1,000 publishers. And we have all the holdcos that are members as well. And so they range from news media, which is the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, New York Times, WAPO, right? We have consumer media, of course, Hearst. We have Condé, who's across the street. We have People, of course, thank you for hosting. And then we have, B2B. We have, widgets today, whatever the B2B subject is. And so, I'm not going to rehash the challenges that they have. Yeah. It's a challenging business, as you heard Katie talk about. But what I'm seeing as a bright spot across all of them is actually audience.
Yeah.
Right. So the audience is actually becoming a bright spot for many publishers, and I'm seeing it in news media. I'm seeing it in consumer media, and I'm seeing it in B2B. And so, I always read the quarterly earnings reports, from the public companies that are members of ours, and you can see from the comments that their subscribers and the money they're generating, from subscribers and the decisions they're making, while they're actually shrinking their audiences, but they're getting more value out of them, right? And so audiences become really, really important. So not only you have subscription revenue, you have direct advertising opportunities, indirect advertising opportunities through programmatic, and there's also, I'll get to at the end, a data play that I think some publishers are really sophisticated about, and some are not, right? We'll talk a little bit about that as well. So, that's kind of the state of the state. And the other thing that I'm seeing from the buyer's point of view is, with all of this, these MFAs, made for arbitrage, AI slop, whatever you want to call it, right? We're seeing a flight from quantity to quality. Right, and you're seeing that the agencies and the holdcos are moving away from exclusion lists to inclusion lists. So they're identifying the quality publishers, the quality inventory, and they're really whittling it down. They're just removing the risk, and going towards, inventory sources that can really deliver for them in a brand safe environment. I see Neil right there, right? So it's really important for them. So that's what we're seeing on our side. So, I don't know if
I was going to ask you a question, maybe for myself and the audience, but when you talk about like the bright spot for audience, is that a quality component, or what's underneath the like bright spot there for those brands that you were referencing?
I think that at the core it's quality, Lindsay, but it translates into much more, right? So it's a quality audience. A lot of times for news media or consumer media, quality oftentimes converts into paid, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
In a B2B environment, it might be based on, what are your demographics? Are you the right target audience? Are you an influencer of purchase?
Yeah.
But then once you identify that, they're generally engaged individuals, right? And they drive a lot of activity, right? Across multiple fronts.
Yeah.
Right. But audience is a significant, bright spot for publishers right now, and they're investing in it.
You're right, though, and at this point, it doesn't seem like consumer willingness to pay has subsided. Like there are economic pressures on wallets, and there's share of wallet, I think, constraints. But as each day passes, the mental model for a consumer that sees media as worth paying for, period, or publisher content, I think actually does continue to grow.
Yeah, I see that on the consumer side as well, for sure. So on the rising value of audiences, right? So there's a lot of pressure from the tech platforms, right? Signal erosion, AI summaries, right? We are seeing publishers, increase the investment, in finding the audiences, maintaining the audiences, and like Katie talked about before, making sure you own the distribution channel as well. So are you seeing that at Hearst?
Yes, and part of the reason I'm there is to do that investment.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So very specifically, my role was net new 2 years ago to work on investing in all things consumer in order to grow the whole pie, right? Because that actually supports our advertising operation, our audience engagement, subscription revenue, et cetera. So a number of the ways we're investing, to the earlier point, our email and our newsletter infrastructure, that I feel like sometimes when you just say just build a newsletter, it really sort of does not represent the level of complexity that actually requires. You have to, first of all, find a reason for someone to give you an email address, right? And so there's a bit of a value exchange there, which can be content. That's obviously the most obvious, but it could be utility or something else. So how do you build that out? So it's easy as long as you've got good ideas and you have a way to do that. And so we're building up kind of all the ways that we can engage with you via email that not only bring you back to the site, but we might deliver value in the email. We could, give you opportunities. We can move you across brands. And so that's a big bedrock, I think, to what we're, on how we're working to do that. To your point, also is a quality signal across our, data infrastructure as well. We are also really fine-tuning the way we talk to people about what we're doing. I think there's kind of this legacy mindset of just like punch it out, or the SEO-ification of everything. And to their point earlier, like that's not really consumer oriented. Does that like communicate what the value is or what you're trying to do? And so we are investing a lot of energy and time on how we reframe to kind of meet the needs of what readers, audience, et cetera, have. I think one of the things that we're also investing in is the true marketing of the content, the stories, the experiences. There's like, again, like I think sometimes there would be this legacy approach, like, well, that's just arbitrage, because there's this whole made for advertising, bucket that's happened. And so I worry that like all marketing has like fallen into that category for a publisher, and I just fundamentally disagree with that. Because again, I think it's like unfair to hold a publisher to the standard that you shouldn't be responsible for marketing your wares just like XYZ widget company. I think you have to do that smartly, thoughtfully. You have to have logic and rationale behind why you're doing it and what you're doing it. But I think that information is actually very helpful to a potential advertising client who, if I put myself in the shoes of a buyer or many of my friends and colleagues, like I want to know actually, like what's that? How is that brand investing in getting their content or brand out there, to the relevant audience that I'm also trying to reach, and that they might be more successful in, and how can I, ride the coattails of that? And so I think it's just a much more strategic way into spending media and marketing that's different from, oh, this is an arbitrage situation, I'm trying to like, pull a fast one.
Right.
And so it's really just like true like fundamentals that we're trying to invest in, having a direct relationship in whichever form that would take. I think one of the other things that I would touch on there is,
Can I just ask,
oh, yeah,
ask one
sure, go
question
ahead.
on that?
Yeah.
So when we had a bit of a board working group six
Yeah.
months ago, and we talked about audience and the quality of audience and the data captured. Now, I know B2B forever has been capturing a lot of data on their audience, but I was surprised to learn, well, maybe not that surprised, that in the consumer environment and the news media environment, they're just afraid to create a lot of friction with the audience, and so they want to get them to pay, and then they layer on like third-party audience on information on top of that.
Yes.
And I think I didn't fully appreciate the scale of that. That okay, I just want them to come in and pay, and then I'm going to layer this information on that. Like, do you see a lot of that? And do you own that information once you layer it on, or is it like just kind of one-time use? How is that? How are you using third parties on your data?
Well, it depends. I mean, certainly like leveraging third-party data, especially for like ad targeting, is like historically in consumer media, as many of you probably know, like a pretty wide practice.
Right.
Because trying to figure out someone's household income when they showed up at your website doesn't feel like an appropriate first question to ask.
Fair.
And so those data sets can be really helpful for a variety of ways to segment a much larger universe of data on your site. But also if you're trying to reach, or speak, like even if you're getting so micro and you have some sort of like subscriber only or membership only event, if you use the Wired example, like you may want to be able to qualify what people you reached out to with that. And so there's a ton of data sets out there that you could leverage. I think trust, quality are all the things you think about when you're leveraging that. But none of them are usually as impactful as acquiring some of your own first-party data. And so I do think like a first-party data strategy is like a one lever that you need to have in the mix of telling that audience story and that quality audience piece. And again, if I worked at Amex or Wayfair, I was doing the same thing, and also making that trade-off decision like, ooh, if I try to get this information from you, it might actually hurt my chances that you decide to check out and buy this piece of furniture because I'm sort of distracting you and I only get it later. But what other like signals can I use to infer and personalize what furniture recommendations I'm making for you? There's a ton of corollaries between that.
Right.
So we would leverage, like a credit card data set sometimes to pull on top of that. That would help us just cut to the chase and make some decisions around what we're showing someone from a personalization standpoint that could be valuable without needing to ask a million questions. But certainly when I was at Bloomberg, and I think they've continued to embark on this strategy, we then, tried to use all these other moments when we could ask relevant pieces of information
okay.
that felt intuitive and not weird.
Just
You're
build
like,
the profile.
you start to build that presence and that profile, because that, I mean, truly from just an experience point of view, like that's just going to potentially make a better customer experience. I think consumers, though, sniff it out. I mean, you guys have all been there where you're like, they're asking me weird questions and I don't actually know how that's going to help me in this moment. If the question of like, what city do you live in, you're like, can see the point to point. You're like, oh, that would actually help so that I stop getting LA news and I only get New York news.
Right.
You're willing to give up that information.
Okay. So I've now been to a couple of things today here that have online queries and surveys. So we're going to go very analog here. Right. So for the publishers in the room, are you seeing more investment in the development of audience? Flat investment or less investment? So if you're investing more, let's see a raise of hands. Well, that's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, what are you guys doing? Anything different or new besides what I mentioned?
All right, people in the front row, you have to answer. Yeah. You go ahead.
I'm with you, Lindsay.
Yeah.
So, we also do the first party thing, we do the third party with Mike Kinzo. So,
Yeah.
do you think it's up? I feel like it's flat over the last year or so.
Yeah. It's like broader infrastructure changes to help make it more productive, I think, is probably like how I would characterize it. Yeah.
I think a lot of times at publishers, the audience data is siloed because of the editorial church and state,
Yeah.
right? The consumer growth is looking, right? They're looking at their data, but they're not allowed to talk to the business data. And basically, you guys are on both sides creating the same data sets with different systems. And so now what's happening is, economies of scale, you can use the same systems and adjoining systems in order to be able to remove the silos and have one brand story, whether it's for business, sales, or for audience.
Yeah. Yeah, that is not new, I would say, in the last couple of years. And like,
It's also really hard.
yeah, it's more of a cultural change, if anything, which is much harder. But it's like hard to imagine how you go forward without breaking down that silo, if that exists anywhere remaining.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure.
Right. Nobody gets hurt. Thank you.
Hello. Okay.
Perfect.
I think building off of what you're saying, data and the deployment of data used to live so separately previously between ad teams, consumer teams, affiliate teams, and right now we at my company have been trying to all come together to understand how we align on the deployment of any promotional space across these various teams, so that way we can really make the most effectiveness out of the real estate. Because what's happening is, on a page, we're all competing for a consumer's attention across the newsroom promos, the affiliate promos, the ad promos, the consumer subscription promos, and they are all living in different systems that are not speaking to each other, and sometimes they conflict, sometimes they overlap, and it's creating a very disjointed and very terrible user experience. So we're coming together to try to identify, one, what is like the unifying data layer that tells us what the economic value of this user and what action they're likely to take. And then also, how do we connect the systems so then they can all speak to each other to say, this should deploy over this because this user is likely to want to see this versus that.
Yeah, it's a great example.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So thank you for that. Want to throw the cue back up, and then I'll circulate.
We have one over there? Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Scratching my head.
But now you have to say something.
I'll keep this for
Say
now.
something interesting. Okay. So, all right, that's on platform, owner operated, right? It's we had a little bit of a conversation before about off platform, right? YouTube, TikTok, Reels. But it was interesting to hear Katie's take on it, right? You have to find the balance. I think they're valuable audiences, but they're not necessarily yours. What's your take on that? How do you balance
yeah,
that?
I know. I thought that was interesting. So I'm somewhere in between.
Right.
Like in a very economic sense, you're like, it's very difficult for me to make any money if you are not going to show up on my website or in my newsletter. I think we all know that that is going to become increasingly difficult. And I think we have to also sort of do both, which is like really hard. But I think there's an element of like, both can be true. You have to have a connection point with that audience that's beyond just, oh, you're one of the millions and millions of followers of your TikTok or Instagram account, of which a very small percentage of those people actually engage with your brand and you could do anything meaningful with or hopefully monetize or get them to show up in some other manner. But at the same time, I think if you're so rigid on only thinking about those platforms as a marketing vehicle, I think it's going to be really difficult to be able to expose people to your brand in a way that, and in a place where they want to engage. If I just even think about my own behavior, you know, my engagement with various platforms, like you know, because it's a shift. You're like, oh, I'm spending less and less time over here, and I'm spending more and more time over here because someone else is actually delivering that thing you need. And maybe in Wired's case, it's technology information that may be getting delivered within, you know, a social platform. And if you're not there to compete, I think it's just a trade-off. It's not going to be for every brand, but I think dismissing it all together and only thinking of it as a marketing versus like a value delivery or a content delivery spot is going to be hard. The problem is like, how do you monetize that? I think at Hearst, like for us, it's about a multi-platform audience, and really like packaging it and thinking about it that way. It becomes more challenging because you have less ownership of that data and information in the same way that you do on your website. And so it requires a bit more ingenuity, and I think we're gonna, and you know, continue to push those platforms and figure out how to work with them. At the same time, if you're entirely reliant on them, and something changes, like yeah, that's terrible.
Right.
So, you know, I think a more pragmatic approach is probably thinking about how you do both.
Right. And I often hear, does someone have a comment?
No, you have 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
The staff in the room.
Oh, okay, thanks.
That's okay. Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please.
Can you not hear me? I feel like I'm pretty loud. Knowing that off-platform, the audiences, the growth, the distribution, you don't own it, but do you guys have a strategy where you try to drive off-platform back to on-platform and then to newsletter, or do you think of it like, I'm still going to build original programming for the off-platform because that's what's going to resonate with the audiences there the most? So like, for example, social or YouTube.
Yeah.
Are you guys thinking about original programming specifically for those platforms, or are you thinking, let's do content there, but really drive them back to O&O so we can own that audience?
I mean, I think you have to do both. I think it becomes increasingly difficult from what I'm seeing, you know, feel free to weigh in, but like, I think it has become increasingly difficult to make content on those platforms that you're like, oh, it's just a funnel back to the website, because people don't go. And then I think even as a you know, consumer myself on those platforms, you're sort of like, ah,
It just falls flat.
it does. And so that's my point. Like I think if you're not making native content, for lack of a better word, for those platforms, at least often enough, it doesn't have to be always. That's why I'm like, I think you can have a mix. I think it becomes hard for someone in an audience to kind of be like, oh, I'm into that. That's cool. I want to be a part of your brand, or I want to read more, or I want to understand more. And so you have to, I think, deliver your content in that way, or else you risk you know, not building an audience at all.
Right. And someone mentioned silos before. I'll take the last couple
And someone
of
else
minutes.
will.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, someone mentioned silos before, but it seems to me that like audience actually is a horizontal function, right? That it sits in the actual, you know, distribution of content. It also sits in an ad ops environment.
Yeah.
It also, we talked a little bit about data before too, you know, that publishers, their first-party data is becoming very valuable. Many publishers don't know how to monetize it, and you actually need a partner like I think you use Optable, right? That or a CDP that kind of brings it, packages it up, and puts it out into the ecosystem, right? But it feels like it's cutting across multiple functions. Like, are you finding you're engaging with different departments within Hearst?
Every day. I think that's the cultural part here, which is they're maybe of yesteryear, they're like, oh, that's just the audience team. It's like everyone owns the audience. And so, but figuring out what that really means and like who has to play what role in bringing that together is actually quite tricky, right? From product engineering, content creators, growth marketers, ad ops, whoever it is. We are on a journey to stitch that together and are getting pretty far along on it. I think it starts at the top though, right? Like you have to have the main people who, have functions that flow down after that. I think having the same conversation, looking at the same data, collectively making decisions about it. And then I do think it's actually empowering everyone to feel responsible for that versus like, I just make the stuff and someone else will find the people that show up. How's that gonna work?
Right.
Like that means, to your beginning here, like I always kind of draw comparisons when I worked in other industries. Like when I worked at Amex, like we listened to we did call listening every month. We had to listen to people call in from customer service and complain about, I hate this card, I wish it was too expensive, or we would sit in front of research, and everyone, no matter the function that they worked in, had to do that. So why do we think about this any differently at a publisher? Audience or the data is the same thing. Like you should be hearing from people all the time and reacting and responding as a collective organization. It's not, I think, one siloed thing. There are some functional expertise in an audience team that you might need, but everyone's really on the hook.
Perfect. Well, my thing says 7, but are we at time?
If you've got a timer, great. We must be running 7 minutes late.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
I have no timer. Just
Oh, yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you for that.
to get it moving.
Yeah, perfect. No, I appreciate that. Now, just to stay on that for a second, like, do you feel like are some as everyone access audiences, everyone needs the audiences. Are there groups that feel they own different pieces of that audience and you can't talk to them, or is it really centralized and we're taking a macro view of how we're going to manage the audience?
Yeah.
What is the take at Hearst?
We have a macro view because we are selling our portfolio, but we are also selling a brand. So we have to do both. And so I think that's a big change for a number of large publishers that have multi-brands. And it's even at Hearst, where we've come up through acquisition and we had this team that was focused on this. And so that's a bit of a journey, but we have to have the macro work. From a consumer standpoint, I also view a portfolio-based consumer opportunity as well. So I think if we're not looking macro, we're doing ourselves a disservice, but that also means we have to drill down very specifically within a brand as well. If you don't mind, I want to flip it on you for a sec, because you have a really interesting perspective, because you meet with all the publishers, agencies, et cetera. You have a new product lead, obviously, in Scott, that's at the AAM. But I'm curious, how you guys are adapting from, I think, what was yesterday. I always am also what was good before always just kind of comes back around again. But what are you hearing and seeing them doing at AAM to kind of help support the audience story piece?
Thanks. What we're seeing and how we're changing is, we're expanding with the media ecosystem, right? So people know us. We're 100 years old. We started out as print. Right, and people still know us for that in many ways. But all of our publisher data, comes in and gets processed and it gets pushed out into the holdcos, right, where they make their decisions on it. It has print, but it also has web, it has app, it has digital magazines, it has events, it has Apple News Plus. Right, so all this information is being fed into the holdcos, and they're actually making their decisions, whether it's discovery, whether it's vetting or validation that they got what they wanted. So we're actually working with publishers now on a cross-channel reporting structure, right? That, it's not just one thing, it's all these channels, and it's gross reporting in each channel to give full credit for each channel. Because, most buyers buy by channel, they don't buy the whole thing. And so we want to make sure that everybody, has full exposure in each of the channels. So that's one thing that we're working on now. And the other thing that we're working on is we're actually meeting with the planning and execution teams on what data do they want fed into their systems directly, right? Some of our data is pull data, some of it is push data. So we really want our data closer to the decision-making process. So how do we plug in, to that environment? So these are changes that we're making as well. And then lastly, we heard Katie talking about it before, is nobody's immune from AI, but we created this new ethical AI program that talks about how publishers, we create these 8 pillars of ethical AI use, and and we create this program where publishers can kind of go through, and it's policies, process, disclosure, human review, risk management. And they review this process, and then they get a badge that says, we're an ethical publisher, right? We follow these practices. We have disclosure when AI is used 100% to create content, or this image was created by AI. So we've got a lot of positive response to that. So cross-channel reporting is important for us. The responsible ethical use of AI is we're working on with that. And then just making sure publisher data gets into the holdcos, for their information. So those are the things that we're working on.
And is the response good from kind of the agency holdco side?
Yep, for
like
sure.
To help, especially to help publishers tell that quality story.
Yeah. The only thing, it's funny, we talked about silos before. There's still silos out there, though. They still have, they have digital teams, and they have print teams, and they have digital out-of-home teams, and they have live teams. And so, I think everyone has a little bit of silo breaking that they still have to get through.
Yeah, totally.
Whether they will or will not, I don't know. But generally, when you talk to the holdcos, you have to be very specific about what you want to talk about, because there's a person for that, right? And they got to go get that person to have that discussion with you, right? And they're like, well, because we have board members, we have good relations with the agencies, but well, I don't really do that, so I got to talk to somebody else. So we spend a lot of time with them, cross teams, and trying to help to bring them together. So I guess they're not much different than a lot of us in so many ways.
I'm excited about the ethical AI certification. I think that's like a good new way to transmit trust and quality and credibility, and especially where things are headed. I think like anything we can do in that, like you guys can do for publishers and for us, I think will be really valuable. The like cross-channel storytelling, becomes, I think, even more important, where it isn't just about, first it was print, then it was just the website, and now it's like, well, actually, like our newsletter lists are really important, and how do we standardize the way we're even looking at that, or where our followers are, et cetera. All those things like just help tell the full audience story.
Exactly. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, I'm a publisher. I founded a platform called Her Agenda. I also co-founded Bomisi, so we represent a network of over 2,000 diverse-owned media companies. And I want to get into more so, and Rich, you started to talk about it, the validation and the proof points that build the confidence with brands and agencies, especially if you're an independent publisher. If you're Hearst, obviously you have that brand name credibility. So if you have a slide and you're claiming, this is my audience, there's that credibility factor. But when you're somebody that might not be so familiar with the brand, with the holdco, how do you actually validate those claims to, this is my audience, this is where I have authority, and this is where you can trust your investment dollars will perform?
Great. Thanks for that question. So, it's easy to talk about the Hearsts and the Condés of the world, but they're few, and the industry is made up of the many that are, the medium and the long tail, right? That's the bulk. The bulk of our members are, 1, 2, 3 properties, right? They join the organization. It's a not-for-profit organization, and they submit their data to us for third-party validation. So, We have a direct link with Google, and so we validate that information directly from Google on traffic and impression measurement. We have tools that go actually capture third-party all of the social metrics directly, right? So we're not getting them from someone else, we're getting them directly. And then we also have a third-party validate. We have a whole team that works on validating it. So anyone that's in the AAM platform, and we have this thing called the Media Intelligence Center that all of the agencies subscribe to, and they come get their data directly. And it's interesting because, in the old days, publishers used to send out, here's my AAM report, here's my report. That doesn't happen anymore. The agencies and the buyers come directly and down that information. So I'll often hear from publishers, no one's asking me for this information anymore. I'm like, no one's asking for anything anymore. They just go get it, right? So my counsel would, join the club, right? And then have your information being pushed into the top buyers.
I think it's that
North America.
collection of items too, right? I do think there's something about not just here's the traffic I have on my site, but also I have this. Like if you've got a couple data points, within a given brand or an audience, I think that helps build the proof points of legitimacy and a third-party accreditation in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, very good. Well, now it's flashing. Now it's a 0. So, guys, I want to thank you all for joining us and spending your time with us today. And thank you, Lindsay.
Yeah, thanks.